Here is the graph of a trigonometric function. Which equation has this graph? Select all that apply. So notice it says all, so there can be more than one answer. And also, think about your unit circle if it helps you. So as we look at A, I'm going to use 1/4 as my testing value for x. So this would be 3/2 times cosine of 2 pi times 1/4 minus pi over 2. Two pi times 1/4 is 2 pi over 4, which simplifies to pi over 2. Pi over 2 minus pi over 2 is 0. And since cosine is our x value, we can see that the x value at 0 is 1. So 3/2 times 1 is 3/2. So we should see a value up here at 3/2, but we don't. So A is not correct. Now we can check B. We have negative 3/2 times sine of 2 pi, and again I'm going to use 1/4 as my test value for x. 2 pi times 1/4 is 2 pi over 4, which simplifies to pi over 2. Now pi over 2 is at the top of our circle, and sine is our y value. So this becomes negative 3/2 because our sine at pi over 2 is 1, and 1 times negative 3/2 is negative 3/2. And that puts us in the proper place. You can test more points, but this is the most obvious point because the answers will be opposite of each other if they're right or wrong. So B is one of our answers. Now, let's check C. This is 3/2 cosine 2 pi, and again I'm going to use 1/4 as my testing point. Two pi times 1/4 becomes pi over 2. Again, this is at the top of the circle. And the cosine value is the x value, which is 0. And 3/2 times 0 is 0. We see that we do not have the value of 0 here, so C is not correct. Option D. I'm going to use the 1/4 again, So this becomes 3/2 cosine 2 pi times 1/4 plus pi over 2. Again, 2 pi times 1/4 becomes pi over 2. And pi over 2 plus pi over 2 is pi. Now cosine of pi puts us on the left side of the circle, where cosine is -1. So our answer would be -3/2. And that's what we see down at the bottom here. So the points correspond, and D is another correct choice. Finally, we have option E. 3/2 times sine of 2 pi times 1/4 plus pi. We said 2 pi times 1/4 becomes pi over 2. And pi over 2 plus pi becomes 3 pi over 2. Now 3 pi over 2 is at the bottom of the circle, where the sine or y value is -1. -1 times 3/2 becomes -3/2. And again, we see down here at the bottom, that's the value we have. So E is also an option. So choices B, D, and E are all functions that have this graph. If you have any questions about how I solved this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification. Here is the graph of a trigonometric function. Which equation has this graph? So we want to look at some features. First thing we notice is that our midline is right here at 1. And we can see that we add 1 on A, B, C, and D. So they all have the correct midline. Next, we can look at the amplitude. How far from the midline to the top of the graph? And we can see that the amplitude is 1/2. So we can see that cosine, or choice A, is just cosine. So A does not have the correct amplitude. But B has an amplitude of 1/2, C has an amplitude of 1/2, and D has an amplitude of 1/2. The amplitude for A would be 1, so that's why we can eliminate A. Next, we're looking for the period. We can see that from -1 until 1, is one full cycle. So the period equals 2. To find the period, we're going to take each frequency, which is the number that we're multiplying by the input, and we will divide by 2. So A we already eliminated. B, we have 1 divided by 2 pi. So that's 1 cycle per 2 pi. So the period equals 2 pi. We're looking for 2. When we look at C, we have pi divided by 2 pi. The pi's cancel each other out, and we have 1 cycle per 2, which means there is a period of 2. And that's what we're looking for. And we'll check D just to make sure. Here we have 2 pi divided by 2 pi. They cancel each other out, so this just becomes 1. So therefore the period is 1. And that's not what we're looking for. So on this one, we can eliminate A because it has the wrong amplitude. We can eliminate B and D because they have the wrong period. And C is the correct answer with an amplitude of 1/2, a midline of 1, and a period of 2. If you have any questions about how I solved this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification. Here is the graph of a trigonometric function. Number 1, find a trigonometric function f that has this graph and explain your reasoning. So first, I'm going to identify the midline. And the midline is right here at 3. So whatever I'm doing is going to have a plus 3. Next, I look at the amplitude. From the midline to the top, I can see this is an amplitude of 1. Then I know that if I were to shift this down to the x-axis where it originated, we would see that this starts at the origin. Well, if this starts at the origin, then we have sine of x. Next, I'm looking at the frequency. I can see that it starts at 0 and it makes a full cycle by the time it's at pi. By the time we get to 2 pi, we now have 2 full cycles. So the frequency is 2. So now I need to change this. This will be sine of x, but now I have a frequency of 2. So my overall function would be sine of 2x plus 3. Number 2. The graph is translated right by pi over 2, so it has a minimum value at x equals 0. Then stretched horizontally, so its period is 3 times greater than the period of f. Find a trigonometric function g that has this new graph and explain your reasoning. So for number 2, a right shift of pi over 2 means x minus pi over 2. Then the period is 3 times greater than the original. So we need to be able to take, instead of doing one cycle in pi, it's now going to take 3 pi to complete a full cycle. So a horizontal stretch of 3 means 2x divided by 3. So now when we write the new equation, g of x, this time it's going to be sine of 2x over 3 minus pi over 2 plus 3. The 2x over 3 represents the horizontal stretch of 3, making it go from one full cycle every pi to one full cycle every 3 pi. And the right shift of pi over 2 means we need to subtract pi over 2 from the input. If you have any questions about how I answered this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification. The function f is given by f of x equals 4 plus 2 sine of pi times x. The graph of g is the graph of f translated left by pi over 2 and translated vertically by minus 1. Which expression defines g? Well, the translation left by pi over 2 means we need x plus pi over 2. The translation vertically by negative 1 means we need to subtract 1 from the function. So, if we look at this, when we're changing it, we need to have 4 minus 1 plus 2 times sine of pi times x plus pi over 2. 4 minus 1 is 3. So our final representation needs to be 3 plus 2 times the sine of pi times x plus pi over 2. And this matches choice D. If you have any questions about how I solved this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification. Here are graphs of trigonometric functions f in black and g in blue. What transformations can be applied to the graph of f to get the graph of g? Make sure to list them in the order they are applied. So the first thing I'm going to do is shift left by 1/4. Then I'm going to shift down by 0.5. Then I can see that I have a period originally from -1 to 0, but now I have a period from -1 to -1/2. So this period is only half as big. So I need a horizontal shift or a horizontal stretch of 1/2, and vertically I can see that I went from 2 to 0, which is 2, but now I go from 1/2 to -1/2, which is 3. So I need a vertical stretch of 3/2. If you have any questions about how I solved this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification.